Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Truth. I'm your host, someone you love the most, Niall Hessen, back with a brand new episode here in The Truth. Back once again with my brother Lucas. Lucas, I already asked how you're doing. I hope you really did not do horribly bad in those 10 minutes, but we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. I know, as I mentioned in the last show, you got a big Iowa game to catch. So, where is your plan of attack for sitting?
It depends. A lot of the times I go with some friends, so they kind of want to sit together, which is fine. But I would be totally good with sitting in. They have the two rows of chairs at the bottom, and I love sitting in the front row, but there's not always like three or four available. So if not, kind of like the first level of seating on the left. I'm sure, hopefully, you'll be able to see me. I'll probably be pulling up on my phone to see and show you. Are you? Will you be watching live?
I don't know. I think I will be. I guess. What time is it at? 7:30?
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably will be watching live. I don't think I have anything going on. Every time you say that I'm going to see you on TV, I never do because you're like hiding behind the hoop.
But that's what I'm in the chairs. But when I'm on the others, you should be able to. Oh, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know this podcast is coming out on Thursday, which is the next day from recording this. But in future, if you're watching the Iowa games, just know that Lucas probably is trying to find a spot. Because how early did the gates open?
Hour and a half. So I'll probably get there today, like an hour before, because I don't really care that much about sitting in the front row.
It's not like you're gonna have to storm the court, anyways, right? I mean,
Yeah,
is
no.
Oregon ranked or no?
No, I mean, they beat Alabama this year. They're just playing terribly the past couple months.
Yeah, I do know that Oregon was kind of progressing in the wrong way, but obviously Iowa's a lot worse, so whatever. Anyways, guys, we're not talking about college basketball here today. We're talking about baseball, as mentioned. We got second basemen to talk about today. We have six total second basemen that we're going to be avoiding. Three from each. We'll each give you three. So without further ado, why don't you go ahead and give me your first second baseman?
Yeah, first guy for me is out of Milwaukee's Bryce Turang. Big fear for me is he's going to get really overpicked, and I think that a lot of people have realized that, or I guess other way around. Not many have realized. I was looking at ADP on Fantasy Pros, and about four of the six have him at 8, and then ESPN has him at 20 for second baseman. So I think ESPN's kind of come along on that train because the thing there is steals, and it just depends on how much the league values steals. But you look at his numbers, other than steals, are not really good at all. I mean, he had 50 steals last year, which again is not bad at all. 142 hits, that's fine. You take it or leave it. I mean, 254 average, 316 OPS, but only a 349 slug. So he's having a 665 OPS, and he's considered a top 10 second baseman in the game. I just don't think that is good. And I mean, that was a sophomore season, so maybe it was a sophomore slump. I just think it's kind of the trend to how he is as a player. So I'd much rather take someone who maybe gets me only 30, 35 steals, but is a much more proven hitter at the second base position and just in general. And I mean, he's part of a team in Milwaukee that is really young. I mean, guys like Garrett Mitchell and Sal Frelick. So it's definitely an exciting team. But I don't think he's going to really give you a lot of production in terms of like extra base hits. Only 7 home runs, 24 doubles isn't bad, but he played nearly the entire season. So you know what you're going to get with Turang. Again, I wouldn't completely avoid him, but if it was maybe close to the middle or end of the draft, I would take him, but not early just because of his stolen base value.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on Turing. I think obviously I've listened to a lot of podcasts, fantasy baseball podcasts for that matter, and everyone that I've listened to, like from different platforms, has been huge on Turang. They're like, this is going to be like the next up and coming guy in Milwaukee. I think a big reason why they're expecting that, as you mentioned, is that stolen base value. Like I think a lot of people value the stolen base position, which if you're in a roto league like we are, I do think that's important. But there's also situations like last year with Estevez Ruiz. I was a big Estevez Ruiz fan because he could get 50 stolen bases, but he ended up not. He ended up getting sent down for a period of time, came back up, randomly hit like 3 home runs in 3 games, and it wasn't the level that he was projected. So I think stolen bases are misleading. I think obviously in those roto leagues people are expecting that. But again, Turang is a guy, as you mentioned, he's got, as I mentioned also last show, like a very young Milwaukee Brewers team, and stolen bases isn't going to be your it all be all. And I think if you're trying to draft stolen bases, you might as well do that a little bit later in the draft with some riskier players as opposed to drafting them as high as people are drafting Trang. Trang was also one of my guys. I'm going to talk about somebody different though, and I know this guy is primarily a third baseman, but again has second base eligibility. It's going to be Jordan Westburg. Jordan Westburg, again, is a guy that I think has kind of risen on second baseman ranks just because I think the second base position overall is a bit unstable and unsteady. Obviously, you look at just players in the Baltimore Orioles system, like a lot of young guys, like a lot of infielders, like Jackson Holliday is a big one. Obviously, Westburg. I believe Westburg is 26, entering his third season. Last year had a pretty good season for Baltimore, was very efficient from the get go. I mean, 18 home runs, 63 RBIs, batted 264, but again, basically averaged a strikeout a game. And every time I see that, especially out of a young guy, I just don't think you can necessarily prove your value in the first couple of years, especially for as high as he's ranked at the second base position, currently ranked sixth. I just think that's really high for a guy that strikes out that much, obviously had good success. His first season, not necessarily a full season, 68 games, the 3 home runs, 23 RBIs, so made a tremendous jump, playing 39 more games, 15 more home runs, 40 more RBIs, all that stuff. But again, he's not a guy that has tremendous stolen base value. 6 stolen bases, again, a guy you're drafting more for that power side and average. But the biggest thing is here, could we see a drop in that average, especially if his strikeouts continue to climb, which is something that I'm worried about. And again, a guy kind of like, I feel like Turang, in the fact that he's kind of getting drafted way higher than people are expecting just because of that young talent that he's able to possess. But again, could be kind of hidden there in Baltimore just because they have a lot of young talent everywhere. What about your second guy?
Yeah, second guy for me, kind of a similar story, but not as much as Andres Gimenez. Just got traded from Cleveland. So again, kind of has that a little string attached. He's working with a new team. And to me, I just don't think he's that good. I mean, he started off hot. He hit, I believe, like 290 in his All-Star season in 2022 for the Guardians, their Mickey Mouse year. But ADP has him like top 14, 15 second base, which isn't like, it's not terribly off. I just don't think I would be picking him really at all. I mean, his numbers last year, he only walked 26 times, which is just seems really low for playing 150 games. Hit 252, 298 on base. I don't like seeing an under 300 on base. Only a 340 slug, so it just seems like he's a singles hitter kind of guy. Only 9 home runs, 22 doubles. The reason he's like so good for the Guardians is his defense, or I guess now it would be the Blue Jays. So not only is he going to a new team, but I just don't think he's all that good with a pretty significantly under 700 OPS, I believe even less than Bryce Turang, and he's not really giving you that stolen base fly. He's giving you 30 steals, but that's like with nothing really else attached. Like at least Turang has a lot of upside as a young guy, but Gimenez has been around for almost 5 years in the league, and you know what you're going to get. And it seems like the past 3 years he's only gotten worse. Hit 297 as I mentioned, 2022, 251 in 23, and 252 in 24. So now he's kind of turned into a guy who will get you a good amount of stolen bases. But again, same thing with Pete Crow Armstrong we talked about a couple episodes ago. You got to get on base. Or we didn't talk about it. That's one of my guys for center field, but spoiler. But you got to get on base to get steals. So I think that's the concern with Gimenez for me.
I kind of feel the opposite on Gimenez. I think partially of that is just because I have partial bias for Gimenez. I like the way he played last year. Again, going into Toronto is going to be a little bit interesting. As you mentioned, I think a little bit of that bias, the fact that he is a Guardian, or he was a Guardian, and you're not a big fan of the Guardians, but definitely some risks there. But again, second base is one of those positions. Typically, you're not like seeing like a corner position where you're getting like 40 home runs a year. Like you're looking at these guys that are fast twitch, high average, high stolen bags, kind of like the next guy I'm going to talk about, which is Luis Garcia for the Nationals. He's 24. He's super young, really vibrant, very good guy. Well, I guess maybe I don't know if he's a very good guy. I meant to say very good player for your fantasy teams. 24, right? He's entering technically, I think, his sixth season in the major leagues. Obviously, played 40 games that rookie campaign in 2020, but he's a guy that the Nationals have been kind of waiting to kind of boom up for a period of time. Definitely had his best season, played the most games, 140, 18 home runs, 70 RBIs. Also batted 282, but again, it was that big of a jump. Oh, also 9 stolen bags the previous year, 22 last year. It's one of those jumps that I think a lot of people are going to jump the gun and think, hey, he's going to consistently do this from the get-go, or he's going to continuously get better and better. I think this year is going to be a year that he kind of halts at his production. I think he could stay in that same range of 18 home runs, 70 RBIs, even 22 stolen bags, but I think people are expecting him to kind of get that next step of 20, 85, 25 and 30, like make the major jump. But I think that's going to be hard to do, especially for a guy where he's at. I think the Nationals played at least better for the start of the year than they were expecting to do. I think that Nationals team is still a little bit too young, and I think he's still too young of a guy to necessarily latch onto the train and say this is going to be a guy that's going to be the same same guy as last year or a similar guy to the year before. But I definitely think he's got a lot of tools. I think he's one of those guys that's going to be a star in this league. I just think this next year, I think it was kind of a massive jump from a lot of stat categories. You don't typically see that year in and year out. I think it was in a way a fluky year, but definitely this year could be a year that he can use those building blocks to get back into where he was at, especially for years to come. Okay, and then your final guy.
Yeah, last guy for me is Marcus Semien. ADP has him top five second base around the board, and you mentioned it. There's definitely instability, I should say, at the second base position. But for me, Semien, the big fear for me is kind of just overpicked. I don't think he's a fifth round guy. He didn't have an amazing season last year. I mean, 23 home runs is fine, 74 RBIs is fine, but under 700 OPS again. He hit 237, 308 on base, 391 slug, 699 LPS. So he has definitely had a big drop off compared to his last 3 years. I mean, Toronto, when he was pretty much the MVP, he hit like 50, not 50 home runs, but he had a lot of home runs, a lot of RBIs, same kind of thing in 23. But 2022 or 2024, I should say, was really disappointing. A lot of the thing could be just he's been playing so much. I mean, the past 4 years, I'd say he's probably close to leading the season in games played. So we kind of have that, and maybe the question mark for him is, okay, maybe we give him some more rest. But again, that's kind of okay. Then maybe I'm not going to make my everyday second baseman in fantasy. So kind of thing with Alonso, how he's a big name. I think Simeon's kind of fallen off a little bit. Not a guy I completely avoid, but in terms of top five second baseman, not something I'd look at, especially considering he is 33 years old and entering his age 34 season in Texas. The hopes, I mean, the team isn't terrible. I mean, they came with World Series in 23. I just think that he's going to really have to prove himself this year. I just know he's making a lot of money to have us under 700 OPS.
My final guy is going to be Luis Rengifo, and I know me and you talked about him a little bit earlier just because for the Dynasty League, but Luis Rengifo is one of those guys that he's kind of in that prime of his career in Los Angeles. I believe 27 years old. Again, another one of those guys that's been in the league for a period of time. 27 years old, entering his seventh season in the majors. Last year, obviously, a little bit of injury, only playing half the games. He's also never played close to a full 62. I think the highest game totals he's played is 120 some. Whether that's I don't think it's because he got sent down. I think it was because of injury. I don't know that. I'm just spitballing. But again, you're not going to get a guy that's going to necessarily play 140, 150 games, or at least he hasn't proved that at this point of his career. Especially last year, only playing in 78 games, had the 6 home runs to 30 RBIs, and 24 stolen bags, which is kind of interesting because that was by far his best stolen bag totals, and he played in half the games of the year. Back when he was playing 127, 126 games, he had a career high of 6. So made a good jump there. And again, I think a lot of people kind of jump the gun on stolen bags and think that stolen bags is the most important stat for fantasy. And again, roto leagues, it could be, but for some reason, people are always, trying to get steals, and that's just not necessarily the best strategy. I think also too, when you look at a guy like Luis Rengifo, I mean, he plays on the Angels, right? Like the Angels, we decided to finish last in the division behind the Athletics. That's saying something, right? This is not a team that's going to be jumping the gun and having success. A lot of young players, Zach Neto, Nolan Chanel, I can never say his name right, Logan O'Hoppe, like a lot of young players, a lot of young talent. And that's just a little bit concerning because you never know what you're going to get out of those guys. But player-wise, I think he's good. Again, just for where he's getting drafted right now in some leagues, it just kind of concerns me, especially at 15. I'd much rather have a guy a little bit lower than him, like Gleyber Torres or even Brandon Lowe. Even though, again, not necessarily always primarily short second base positions, but at least that filler spot there, I think Rengifo is a little bit of a downgrade. Well, thank you guys for listening to another episode here on The Truth. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure you follow The Truth on Twitter, The Truth as one, to stay up to date with the latest information regarding The Truth, including podcast dates, podcast uploads, and other important information you don't want to miss. Make sure you guys also follow The Truth on Instagram and TikTok at the.tt.truth. Are you looking to find a drink that offers peak hydration? It raises your energy levels, speeds up your recovery, and keeps your mind sharply focused and memory. Look no further than Acid Rainwater. I'm excited to partner with Bloodline Sports, AZ, and Acid Rainwater, which focuses on peak hydration and productivity while also maintaining an ecosystem-friendly product. Use code HESSON15, that's HESSON15 for 15% off every purchase. As always, I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hesson, joined once again by my brother Lucas. Take care and good night.